I've recently been experimenting with stats from past seasons of MDL to see if I can pick out players who have gone on to have a bright future, and the one I've landed on seems to do a pretty decent job at that. If we take a look at this graph, the higher a player is on this graph, the higher their regular HLTV rating, while the further right they are on the graph, the higher rating they have in comparison to the average rating of their teammates. Or in other words, they're going to be a standout player on their team. For this season 30 of MDL back in early 2019, ZywOo tops this by some distance. He dropped a stupid 1.55 rating, which was 0.33 higher than the average of his teammates. But then second on this list is Stown, who was playing for X-Fragsters and who only had the 16th highest rating overall in the league, but he was way ahead of any of his teammates. So a 1.18 rating on a team who got relegated is an excellent rating on a team that didn't win many games, so is clearly something worth looking at. And then using this metric, the third player to show up is Mantu. Again, his raw rating would only put him 13th on the list of players, but he has a 1.18 rating on a team whose average was only a 1.01. This method generally seems to hold up for this season, where almost all the players who outperform their team's average have gone on to do great things. Even though this is when Hunter and Otto were on Valiant, Keto was on Epsilon, Searson was on Sprout, and these guys hadn't had their big moves yet. Obviously not all of these guys have gone on to bigger and better things, but generally the ones who were less experienced seem to have found their way onto top teams in the current day. I decided to compare this to the next season, which was season 31 in the middle of 2019, just to double check if my findings were right over multiple seasons. Remember, we're looking for players on the furthest right side of the graph, and once again, Mantu pops up here. Even though his 1.08 rating probably wouldn't catch anyone's eye initially if you were just scrolling through the stats, compared to Alternate Attacks' average rating of just a measly 0.91, he now stands out as the second highest prospect. Other notable players include Nork, who was great on a middling Gamer Legion team, Searson, who stood out on a great Sprout team, Hunter is here again, he was the top player on the best team in Valiance, SDY on Spirit, who was able to stay with this squad and eventually get to tier 1 tournaments, keeping SDY, and even Hampus is quite high up on this list, who hasn't gone on to be a star player, but instead the IGL of NIP. Now I'm not gonna lie, these players haven't all hit it home big yet. Petishek and Reitz are two of the players who are highest on this metric, but I think being in the Polish scene has probably drawn them back. They don't really have a top tier team they can aspire to be on. And then the guy that's number one on this list is a German player called Andy, who was playing on Expert, who were a bad team in MDL. He put up good numbers, but part of the reason why he might not have developed is I'm pretty sure he got involved in that Unicorns of Love team after this, and there were a lot of rumors about them potentially cheating or match fixing or all sorts of weird stuff going on. So I'm kind of not that surprised that he hasn't necessarily broke through yet. So let's go ahead and use this method on the most recent season of MDL to see which players stand out. And straight away, the first player off the bat is mezii, who you might know has already been picked up by a top team. He did only play 11 maps of MDL this season because he got picked up by Cloud9 so early, but in those maps he put up a 1.26 rating on Gamer Legion, a team who have generally been finishing in the bottom half of MDL. I do think that mezii's playstyle is inherently going to boost his stats slightly. He normally plays a more passive style where he's able to get more trade kills, but doing this effectively is a skill in and of itself, and a very valuable one at that. mezii also had the highest KAST percentage in the rounds he played, otherwise known as rounds where you had some sort of impact. And in case you hadn't guessed already by the clips I was showing, he was obviously a great clutch player. Even though he played about half the games of anyone else in MDL this season, he still finished 12th in terms of total clutches. Probably would have won this thing if he stayed in for the whole season, and this definitely helps exemplify the kind of player that he is. Up next is IM, the 11th highest rated player for the season with a 1.18 rating, but he did this on a Nexus team who only averaged a 0.99 rating. IM is an aggressive Romanian rifler who had a 31% attempted opening kill percentage on T side, which was the third highest in this MDL season. But more importantly, he did this while sustaining a 50% success rate in these opening fights, which is really impressive. Imagine if your entry fragger is winning half the fights for you. That is such a strong way to start rounds. I do have some concerns with his stats though. For example, he only averaged a 1.00 rating once reaching the best of 3 playoffs, and also had some really high ratings in blowout wins, which probably skew the stats more in his favor than they should. And that probably comes due to his aggressive rifling style. If his team is winning big, he's probably going to be involved in the early fights, racking up the kills. I think the main problem he's going to have though is being from Romania, it could be really hard to break out of the scene or try and rise with this team. If he doesn't get international options, he might struggle to develop as a player. We've seen plenty of players have this issue in the past. Just look at someone like Lollipop on the Mega. He's a guy who's been around for a while, but he's never really been able to break through because of the region he's come from. The third player on the list is flameZ, who is someone I'm very excited about. He was the second highest rated player in MDL on Team Endpoint, who had a pretty good run in the regular season, but really stepped it up in playoffs to win the whole thing and get a spot in Pro League next season. flameZ is an Israeli rifler who had few games on HLTV in the local scene before starting to play on some EU teams in mid-2020 and then fast-tracking himself onto a spot on Endpoint. He's only 17 years old. He's another somewhat aggressive rifler with a 27% opening kill percentage on the T side, which was 8th highest in this season of MDL. And he also has that same high success rate as IM at 50%. I also really like that flameZ has above average flash and nade stats, which is something that certainly bodes well for his future development. And he also has decent clutch stats compared to his teammates. Even though he plays aggro, he's actually got one of the highest clutch rates on his team. He also had a fair few shaky maps at the start of this season of MDL, which is kind of to be expected considering he's quite inexperienced, but he improved over time to average a 1.33 rating once they hit the best of 3 playoffs, which was above his average for the season. So definitely a lot to like about flameZ, and considering how inexperienced he was before this season of MDL, I think it's fair to say he is very likely to go on to do big things and compete in some top tier tournaments. Up next is Lollipop, who's played MDL since season 32 and was the 4th highest rated this season on a decent Nemiga team. Lollipop has been around for a while, but he's stuck in the Belarusian scene, although I am pretty sure he does speak English, so that is an option for him going international. He's 24 years old, and he's more of a passive rifler. He only has a 13% T-side attempt opening kill rate, which is much lower than some of those entries we heard from earlier. But this allows him to put up some super solid numbers across the board. He had the 4th highest ADR, he had the 3rd most rounds with at least 1 kill, and he had the 5th highest headshots per round. He also had okay nade numbers. He was more towards the middle of the pack in this aspect in MDL this season. But something that is slightly surprising and maybe concerning is that even though I kind of see him as a more passive player, he only won 3 clutches throughout this entire season of MDL, which is way lower than I'd expect. I'd probably argue that Lollipop isn't a prospect anymore since he's been around for a while, but I still think he's a player that could probably do pretty well if he got the chance to play on another team. The last player worth looking at is anarchists, a 21-year-old Israeli AWPer who just finished his first season of MDL. He put up a 1.17 rating on Secret, a team who averaged a 1.02 rating, and I read a really cool article on HLTV recently which said that he was actually in the military when he got picked up by Secret, but he got discharged, which allowed him to fully focus on CS. Check out that article down below. He's quite an active AWPer. He had the 3rd highest opening kills per round and the 2nd highest success rate in opening duels, which is pretty impressive. He did have low nade damage, but he also had great flash numbers for a star AWPer. And he also had 10 clutches won, which was the second highest for any AWPer in this season of MDL. Oftentimes it's quite hard for AWPers to transition when they get picked up by top teams, but anarchists apparently has good work ethic and he's showing signs that he's willing to be proactive with the AWP, which is exactly what you need if you're going to be an AWPer on a top team. So definitely another player worth watching out for. So there we go, those are the top prospects from this season of MDL according to my metric. I do think this stat missed out a couple of players who I think are really good prospects. Guys like Diha, I think he's going to be great. His aim looks incredible. Faven also looks like a good player, and there are plenty of other players who have kind of been missed here. But I will be very interested to track these 5 guys going forwards to see how they can do. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you next time.